So our next session is Big Picture, Small Picture and the Art of Framing. Our speaker for this session is Edwin Skau. All of us know him because he's been such a popular speaker at so many past STC conferences. So just to give a brief introduction about him, Edwin is a senior technical communicator and a strategist at large. He has worn multiple hats. So before moving to technical communications, he's been a teacher, sales manager, journalist, a songwriter, and a musician. He loves the field of technical communications because it gives him a ringside view of how life changing technical revolutions unfold, and he loves being a part of the process. His hobbies are reading, listening to and creating music, making friends, solving problems, and woodworking. Drawing from his experience as sole caregiver for his late parents and dependent sister, Edwin is now developing software for the healthcare industry. Edwin is a very popular speaker known for his entertaining and engaging sessions. Just watching him speak is a great learning experience for all of us on how we can become good public speakers. So we are so glad to have you here with us today, Edwin. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Prachi. That was very kind of you. Uh, so as usual, my presentations are not about tools and approaches and processes and stuff like that. My presentation is more about how to think about what you do, how to think about your work and everything around it, right? So last night I had a shock, and I think I gave Rajiv a shock early in the morning with a message when I told him my laptop had crashed and I might need to withdraw from the presentation. And then I put together from what I remembered of the thing on my daughter's laptop, and now I have that going. So I hope I don't let you down with what I have today, but I will try to keep you engaged with experiences and other illustrations that I give you, right?
And Edwin, thank you so much for accommodating our session and being here. I know you have been having some personal challenges, and I prayed overnight for your laptop also to be all right, so that you can.
Thank you so much. So your prayers were
Thank you
answered,
so much.
as were mine. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I thought I should probably build a presentation based on what people want to hear about. So I asked people on LinkedIn and on Facebook about what they want to hear, and I got a bunch of responses. Some of them I really can't address here. Some of them were, for example, one was about how can 4G and 5G exist on the same network? And that's not an appropriate topic for here. There was another one about how to monetize documentation. And that is an interesting topic. However, I did not have enough time to do the research to justify having a presentation here, but I will present that in an article in Indus at some point. I got a lot of private responses as well. And one of those that were popular and consistent across at least 7 or 8 people was about how do technical writers earn the respect of the others in their company. So 1 minute, I want to share. Okay, so how can we earn respect as technical communicators? And this has been a long-standing and very popular question. It keeps cropping up over and over again in technical writing forums in India and abroad. And apparently there is a respect problem with our profession. And I thought long and hard about this. This is something that I've been addressing with team members and with other peers in the field. And the answer to it is actually very simple and very short. To make others respect you, you must first respect yourself, right? People are not going to respect you if you don't respect yourself. You must respect yourself. In the workplace, what that translates into is this. It means taking your work and your responsibility seriously. In the 7 habits of successful people, you come across the point of sharpening the saw. Sharpening the saw basically means investing constantly in getting better at what you do and how you do it. This means learning more about technical communication, more about what, the attending sessions like this, attending the knowledge sharing sessions that the STC organizes, reading up about this on the internet, connecting with people on LinkedIn and on Facebook or people in the field, and asking them questions about what they've done. One of the things that I enjoy and one of the things that I'm missing in this year's STC conference is face-to-face meeting with people. A lot of knowledge sharing happens in the corridors and at the pantry and at the at the coffee station. So sharpen the saw, constantly improve your skills and what you can do. Value stuffing, maximize the value of what you do. There's a typo here. Maximize the value of what you do. Do as much as you can in every project you do, in every assignment that you have, and explain the value of what you're adding. Sometimes it is not too obvious to people that you do things for. So explain the value of what you do to stakeholders, and they will come back to you for that again. Connecting, reach out to engineers, reach out to testers, reach out to other people in the organization, learn about what they do, learn their jargon and speak their language. When they identify with you, when you identify with their community, communication flows more freely. They learn to respect what you do, and as you respect what they do as well. There's mutual respect between these other departments. Gifting excellence. In a previous presentation, I talked about how excellence is a gift. You can squeeze performance from a person, but you cannot squeeze out excellence. Excellence has to be gifted. It's something that you do above and beyond your job description and the role and your role. Okay, so I hope that that question is addressed. And with that, we will move to my presentation, which is big picture, small picture, and the art of framing. The word framing comes from the word frame, which is used for pictures. We usually use frames of pictures, photographs, or any two-dimensional object of art. And the role of a picture frame is to set pictures apart from the background. If you put it just against the wall, it kind of merges into the wall and becomes part of the wall. And then that looks more like graffiti than a work of art. You put a frame around the picture and you mount it on your wall, and then it sets it apart from the background, and it focuses on the picture. To set them as part of a group of paintings, sometimes you have you seen these walls where they have multiple frames, and you have a lot of frames with the same design, the same format, same material, same color, and you know which works of art work together and which works of art are separate. To make a picture stand out, if you go to an art museum, you'll see beautiful frames, and sometimes these picture frames are more expensive than the work of art itself. The picture frame itself is a work of art, and it makes the picture stand out. There are sometimes I've seen tiny paintings with huge frames. You know, there's this big black border that cuts out everything from around it, and it makes you focus on the beauty of that miniature painting itself to provide a beautiful setting for the picture, right? As I mentioned in the previous point, the frame itself is a work of art, and sometimes it complements the picture. A bad picture frame is one that robs attention from the picture, and it distracts you from the beauty of what the artist wanted to share with you. So frames are used to lend perspective and depth to the beauty of a painting. Frames help you focus on the work of art. Framing in communication is used to set the context for information, to improve understanding, to eliminate noise, to facilitate better decisions, to influence behavior, and a whole bunch of other things as well. We will see how framing is used in psychological counseling, how it is used in problem solving. In fact, it's used a lot in problem solving and decision making, and that is where I get most of my content from. Okay, so to give you an example of framing, some time ago on one of our technical writing forums, there was a question that someone floated. And the question was, does a technical communicator need to learn about the technical domain and why? And has anyone given that thought? Does a technical writer need to learn about the technical domain, and why should they learn about the technical domain?
Edwin, if you are expecting answers from the audience, they won't be able to speak. They only have to use the.
Okay, thanks for telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I guess you folks are muted, so you won't be able to speak, and I will just go ahead then, as if I'm going to answer my own question. Okay, so there were a lot of responses to that. The thread went on. There were more than about 150 or close to 200 responses to that. And the responses were along two lines. One was about how you can explain things better, you can understand the product better, you can understand the user better if you learn the technical domain. And then there was the age-old excuse for not learning, where ignorance is an asset. That sort of explanation. And people said, if I don't know about the domain, then I will be able to represent the user who is a novice and who is also ignorant. That never made sense to me then. It doesn't make sense to me now, and it has always been an excuse. So I looked at the thread and I said, why don't I give this a different response? And my response to that was, over time, if you do not accumulate domain knowledge, it becomes that much easier to replace you with a less expensive resource. And most of us have either been victims of this or have witnessed this happen in our workplace. I know a lot of senior professionals who complain about this from all fields, from development, from sales, marketing, engineering, and all of them say that companies just want cheaper, newer resources, people that they can order around and get stuff done. And sometimes I've looked at that person and I've known about their work, and I've thought to myself, you did not develop your skills, you did not develop domain knowledge. A new person is going to be able to deliver at your level in no time. I didn't tell them that, but it becomes clear, and you look around you, and some of you will look at yourself and realize that you've been doing the same thing for many years. You may have used different tools, you may have used different processes, but the quality content has remained flat. It is plateaued, and we're not delivering at a higher level. One of the chief reasons of that is because we have not bothered to learn more about the technical domain. And when that happens, it becomes easier for them to hire someone who has all of those horizontal skills and can deliver at the same level of output, right? So I went back to that thread a couple of days later, and that discussion had stopped with my comment. Nobody challenged that. Nobody said that this was not what they were looking for. People understood that this made sense. That the whole argument about whether you add value or don't add value and all of that was immaterial now when you talked about the danger of not accumulating domain knowledge. So what did I do? I focused on risk and reward. Instead of focusing on what is the benefit of learning domain knowledge, I talked about what is the danger of not increasing your domain knowledge. So I reframed that perspective, I reframed that context, and I gave them something to think about, right? When I lived in Gurgaon, my daughter was a toddler, and we would walk around the campus with our neighbor who was an army wife. And she would walk around with us. My daughter was full of energy. She would cycle, she would ride her tricycle around the campus 2 or 3 times without getting tired. And when we walked, she would run and she would trip and she would almost fall Sometimes she would fall and she would get hurt. And I would keep telling her, I would keep saying, Cookie, don't run, you'll fall. Cookie, don't jump. Cookie, do this, and Cookie, don't do that. And there was this time when I didn't notice her running, and our neighbor called out to her and said, Cookie, walk, don't run. And I'm always waiting for situations like this that I can learn from. And as soon as she said that, I reflected on what she said, and I said, oh wow, why didn't I think of that? She actually told her what she should be doing instead of telling her what she should not be doing. And that makes so much sense when you're bringing up a child, because there are a million things your kids should not do, and you will get tired, you will run out of energy, you will run out of life telling them not to do this and not to do that and not to do the millionth and second thing. But if you tell them what they should be doing, if you focus their attention on what they should be doing, then that solves the problem. It keeps them occupied, it focuses their mind. And often very precocious and mischievous kids, all they need is to have their attention focused on something productive and engaging. This happens in the workplace too. There are lots of warnings in the workplace about not using your the internet connection to look for jobs, not watching movies. And very clearly what they're not doing is they're not telling them what they should be doing. They're not focusing them. They're not keeping them engaged on productive activities. When you do that, you don't need to tell them what they should not be doing. You focus on what needs to be done. That is a framing example as well. Richard Feynman is a known physicist, and Richard Feynman was known for walking into classrooms when he was in school and in college. He would walk into a classroom, would see a problem on the board, he'd sit down, he'd solve that problem before everybody else, and he'd walk out of the room with the correct answer. And people thought he was a genius, and he said, no, I'm not a genius. I just reframe the question and I think about it differently, and I arrive at the answer through a shortcut. Everybody uses the standard approach, the approach they've been taught, and they're worried about whether they're getting it right, they're following the right steps. I do it my own way. And one example of that is from the childhood of Kurt Gödel. Kurt Gödel was a mathematician. He lived from 1906 to 1978, so he's a very recent hero in the area of mathematics and logic, and he's been called the father of logic. So when he was in elementary school, and he was a prodigy, he was a child genius, and sometimes these child geniuses can be a little irritating because they're so excited about how much they know, and they can tire you out. But it's amazing to watch them think and arrive at their conclusions. So the teacher in that class wanted to do something for herself, so she gave them an assignment, and she said, why don't you add all of the numbers from 1 to 100 and tell me what the total is? She said, okay, this is going to keep them busy for some time. In the meantime, I can get my work done. So all of the normal kids like us went and started adding 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And then she looked up and she saw Gödel was sitting over there, and he was looking around, and she asked him, why aren't you doing the assignment I gave you? And he said, I'm finished. And she could not believe it. And she went and looked at his answer, and she had to work it out the long way to check his answer. And by the time she had finished, some of the other kids had finished too. And then she asked him, how did you solve this so fast? This is the correct answer. And he showed her how he reframed that problem. His solution was this. He paired up the opposite ends of the number set. So 100 plus 1 is 101. 99 plus 2 is 101. 98 plus 3 is 101. And when you pair up those numbers, how many pairs do you get? You get 50 pairs, right? And if the answer to 50 pairs is all going to be 101, then all you do is you multiply 50 by 101 and you get 5050. And he did this in the blink of an eye, and he got that answer. And this is how reframing is used. This is how reframing works. This is the advantage that you have with framing. What is framing? Framing is the art of influencing the choices people make by focusing their attention within a field of meaning or a cognitive frame, right? So Framing is the art of influencing the choice. It's the art of influencing decisions. It's the art of drawing their attention to particular parts of a problem by framing it using language. And the tools that we use are mental models, idioms, rhetoric, and emphasis. I've spoken about mental models in a previous session. Mental models are basically models that we have. It's the way our brain explains the external world to us. We have some common mental models. We have some mental models that are taught and learned. For example, you have your DDLC, you have your SDLC, those are mental models. You have your graphs, the X and Y axis, those are mental models. You have flow charts, those are mental models. We have idioms, everybody knows what idioms are. Rhetorical devices are various argumentation strategies where you use things to present information in different ways. And you use emphasis. One of the examples that we have for emphasis is the use of active voice and passive voice in documentation. And that is another discussion we have once in a while. Every now and then someone asks, why have they used passive voice here when we should only be using active voice? And then they learn that, it is not compulsory that you use active voice everywhere. Sometimes when you need to focus on the action instead of the actor, you use passive voice. However, these are some of the tools that you use in order to frame your communication. The power of framing is in how you say something, not what you actually end up saying. When my daughter was young, she, like me, was mathematically challenged. So we put her in the mental mathematics class. There was a chain of classes called abacus. They would give them an abacus and they would teach them how to use that to make calculations quickly. In no time, she was calculating numbers much faster than me. And I was wondering if I should be part of that, or maybe I should pull her out of class so that she might get, a little arrogant at home. But anyway, so the first day we went there, they had a presentation for the parents, and they were talking about, how to focus the mind. And they say there are some things that we do with our children that have the opposite effect. For example, I want you to try this. It'll take you a few seconds. This is what he asks us to do. He says, close your eyes and do not think of a pink elephant. So close your eyes and do not think of a pink elephant. And I laughed at at what he was saying. And I said, oh, I can do this easily. And I closed my eyes and guess what? There was a big pink elephant there behind my eyelids. And I could not shake that away. The more vehemently I thought about not thinking of the pink elephant, the very mention of pink elephant evoked that image, right? So sometimes negating a frame itself strengthens that frame. Modern theory of decision-making under risk assumes that people are generally effective at pursuing their goals, especially when there is an incentive. What this means in everyday lingo is if you want something, it is fair to assume that you will go after it and you know how to go after it. Competition favors rational individuals and organizations. Optimal decisions increase the chances of survival. So in a situation where there is competition, the successful or the survivors of that competition are the ones who are more rational, who make better choices. The axioms that drive rational choice have an intuitive appeal that make choice behavior acceptable. So the framing you use to express a problem or a situation has an intuitive logic built into it that is seductive. And sometimes that logic appeals to someone so much that that is the first choice they will make. Here's an example. Okay, so would you accept a gamble that offers a 10% chance to win 95 rupees and a 90% chance to lose 5 rupees? Or would you pay 5 rupees to participate in a lottery that offers a 10% chance to win 100 rupees and a 90% chance to win nothing? Okay, So depending on whether you're a gambler or whether you like buying lottery, you might choose one over the other, right? But the outcomes of both of them are the same. It's just that some people who look at the first one say, okay, I'm not putting any money out there, right? But if you look at that carefully, you lose 5 rupees at the end of it. So 5 rupees goes from you in any case. The second one, you lose the 5 rupees upfront. They're both equal, they're both same, they both have the same outcome. But one appeals to some people more than the other does. This is difficult to do over a Zoom call, but if we had a crowd in a room, then we could have asked for a show of hands. And I'm sure we would have seen a 50-50 distribution of across both of these choices. So what happens when you are making a decision over here, right? We're looking at the risk and reward. We're looking at keep and we're looking at lose, right? So in one choice, we look like we get to keep the money we have after we bought the lottery ticket. In the other choice, you're losing some money. So there is a risk reward instinct that kicks in over there, and you choose one or the other because of your perception of risk and reward. In the US some time ago, credit card companies were in a big discussion with gas stations because they announced over there they would have a board saying that your credit card purchases would have a surcharge. And we do have that with some credit cards even today, right? If you buy something by credit card, the shopkeeper says, this will attract a 3% surcharge or a 1.5% surcharge or a 2% surcharge. And that is one of the, that goes along with using a credit card. But the credit card companies did not like that because they thought it would discourage people from using credit cards. So what they said was, instead of that, why don't you tell them that there is a discount of 3% if you buy this by cash? Because they figured out, they discussed with their consultants, and a lot of these people use behavior economics specialists and psychologists to design their offerings and their schemes. And they discovered that people are willing to forego a discount, but people are not willing to pay a surcharge. Because when you pay a surcharge, it feels like money going out of your pocket. When you forego a discount, it just feels like you're not taking money that's coming in, and that is all right. Right? So framing made a difference there, and people do not move to making cash payments so as much as they thought they would. So in the study of framing and in the study of a prospect theory, they looked at the brain activity that responds to how things are worded. And there are 3 parts of the brain they looked at where there was increased activity given certain reactions. So they looked at brain activity, they actually observed brain activity, and they matched that with the kind of responses people gave. And the amygdala, which is something we've studied before because it's an emotion center in the brain, it is commonly associated with emotional arousal. It is more likely to be active when subjects conform to a frame. When a frame seems to give you a certain benefit or seems to expose you to a certain risk, and you make your decision according to what it seems to offer, and then your emotional center is more aroused. So you have an emotional stimulus and an emotional attachment to the decision you make. The anterior cingulate, a brain region known to be associated with conflict and self-control, is more active when subjects do not do what comes naturally. There are some people in your team, there are some people in your office, there are some people that you meet during coffee breaks who think a little out of the box, who like to swim against the tide. And when everybody's saying one thing, they'll say, if you take a step back and look at this differently, maybe there is another way to look at it. People like that will choose the right thing in spite of its label, right? What is a label? A label is a way of determining what something stands for. The prefrontal cortex, that is the area over here in front of your, on your forehead. And some of us have big foreheads with a big bulge, and they're supposed to be people who make sound decisions according to neurologists. Brain region that is known to combine emotion and rational to make decisions is most active in the most rational decision makers. So there is a neurological explanation to how framing works as well. Take a look at this this question. So Adam switches from a car with a mileage of 12 kilometers per liter to one that gives 14 kilometers per liter. So he moves to a car that gives better mileage. Beth, who is a little more conscious about her carbon footprint, switches from a 30 kilometers per liter car to one that gives her 40 kilometers per liter. Okay, so Adam switches from one that gives him 12 to 14, so that's an increase of 2 kilometers per liter. Beth switches from 30 kilometers per liter to 40 kilometers per liter, which is a jump of about 10 kilometers per liter. Now, if both drivers travel equal distances over a year, who will save more gas by switching? Okay, I would have loved to see your answers, but I don't really know how to do that on Zoom. I'm sure they have a polling. They have a polling option, but this is blinking.
Edwin, you could have people type in the chat window if you're okay with that.
Yeah, but this is more like a poll question, so
Oh.
I will need a substantial number of responses. So anyway, if someone is chatting with me and they've given me an answer.
Are you able to see the chat window? So somebody said that none, since you're asking about gas. Somebody has said it's Beth.
Okay. And that is the popular response, right? Where I've seen this question being asked, most people think it is Beth because there's a 10-kilometer difference, right? However, let's look at it if they both travel the same number of kilometers. Okay, if the two car owners, need to close this. If both of them travel 10,000 kilometers, 10,000, okay, miles I've said, but 10,000 kilometers, right? Adam will reduce his consumption from 833 liters to 714 liters. He will be saving 119 liters. Beth's car, which is more fuel efficient, will drop from 333 liters to 250, saving only 83 liters. So who makes a bigger difference to the environment? Adam, with his gas guzzling car, makes a bigger difference because even that difference of 2 liters for a car that gives you a very poor mileage makes a much bigger difference than when a fuel efficient car moves to a more fuel efficient car. So Adam makes a bigger difference because he makes a difference of 119 liters of petrol that are burnt and exhaust spewed into the air, whereas Beth only reduces 83 liters. So sometimes framing needs to be looked at carefully. You need to look at it from another perspective to fully understand what it really means, what you're looking at, and what information matters and what information doesn't matter. Reframing psychological counseling, okay? In psychological counseling, they use reframing in order to help people overcome issues. Used properly and consistently, it helps eliminate negative thoughts, challenging limiting beliefs, and makes one a happier person. In schools, they have counselors. In schools abroad, they have counselors. Some schools in India have counselors too, because a lot of children take in input from adults, and sometimes that gives them a negative self-perception. That needs to be channeled, that needs to be corrected, that needs to be addressed so that the child does not grow up with a warped self-image, right? And we need to understand that thoughts shape beliefs. If you think something a lot, if you think a lot of negative thoughts, you will start being you will start looking at the world through negative glasses. Beliefs shape emotions. If you have negative beliefs about everything, your emotions are going to be more pessimistic. You're going to expect the worst from everything, and that will shape the way you behave in society, at the workplace, and at home as well. If you want to change something that you think, feel, or do, start by using reframing to shape your thoughts. This is how you do that. 3 steps to changing toxic behaviors. One, the first part is awareness. The first part of any change is awareness. You need to be aware that you have a problem. You need to be aware of where that problem arises. You need to be aware of what that problem is, how that problem originates, and why it is a problem in the first place. And most often those problems are because of the conclusions we draw from any given situation. You take 2 people, show them one situation, and they will come away with different conclusions. One person looks at it with promise, the other person looks at it as a failure waiting to happen, right? So you challenge your conclusions. If you read Eliyahu Goldratt's The Goal, he's got a book called The Goal, Eliyahu Goldratt. He also is the originator and the inventor of Critical Chain, which is a program management, a very effective program management methodology. He talks about, he has a tool called, it's a conflict management tool, which he calls the conflict cloud. So he has a conflict cloud, and there are 2 points of conflict. One person says A and the other person says B. And he says, if you keep hammering at the conflict A and the position A and position B, you will never reach a solution. What you need to do is go behind that position and look at the assumptions on which that position is based. And then you try to justify those assumptions, and you can explain away those assumptions, right? Sometimes you might say, okay, this guy, this security guy is a thief. And why do you think he's a thief? And the other guy says, no, he's honest. And when you go and you dig into the assumptions that that person is basing his thing on, he says, I see him with a new cell phone every week. How can a guy with his pay afford a new cell phone every week? And the guy who thinks he's honest knows that maybe his brother has a shop that sells used cell phones, and this guy just uses a new cell phone every week, tries them out, he feels happy using a different cell phone. He doesn't have a cell phone of his own. All the cell phones he uses is borrowed from his brother's shop, right? So if you go and you actually look at the assumptions on which your position is built, you will be able to solve that conflict. So replace your faulty beliefs, challenge your conclusions, and replace your faulty beliefs. Your conclusions are based on faulty beliefs or true beliefs. If your conclusion is based on a faulty belief, then you need to replace that with the truth, with the facts. Sometimes you might arrive at a negative conclusion because of the facts, and those negative conclusions are necessary, because not everything is hunky-dory in the world. Not everything is positive. Not everything is good for you. There are some things you need to be aware of. There are some things that you need to be careful of. So negativity in the right place at the right time in the right proportions is a good thing, right? But if it is leading to toxic behavior, then it needs to be addressed. Reframing to solve problems. Some time ago, I was looking up, computer science 101 courses. I went to Udemy, and I went to because I've got this interest now in development. I learned some programming languages in the past. I never used them to build anything. And they just teach you the semantics of the language and how to write code. They don't teach you how to use problem solving. And in computer science, if those of you who've done computer science, I don't know how the courses are taught over here. So I went and looked at the Harvard computer science lecture. There is an introduction to computer science lecture on YouTube. And I would encourage all of you to go and look at that. That professor who does that is an amazing professor. I admire him for the way he teaches, the example he gives, the way he simplifies everything so you understand things so well. He explains problem solving, and he says the whole point of computer software is to increase efficiency in problem solving. And there's no point if you're just doing it slightly faster than the other. You have to have an exponential value to the efficiency as well. And he gives you an example. So he says, let's count the number of people we have in this hall. And we could have done this if we had a hall. Next year, if we do not have the pandemic, I will be so happy to meet all of you face to face, talk to you, and have sessions like this where we can actually role play these examples. So anyway, he asks people, he says, how many people do we have over here? He says the person at the door has a number. We will use that to verify our results. But here's one way to do it. The long and hard way to do it is to have one person go from one end to the other and count each individual serially, linearly, right? And if it takes 1 second to count one person, then it'll take as many seconds as there are people over there, and they would probably use the rest of the day counting it. Because a big hall, there was a lot of people. He said there is another way to do it, and this is how sometimes computer software solutions solve problems. And he said, I want you to pair up, everyone find a partner, and one person represents both of you. So one person, if I ask you, how many are you? You will say 2. Okay, so he did that. Then he says, each of you, he said, the person who represents stand up and the other person sit down. And he said, each of you pair up with somebody else, right? And he did this about 5 times. And then he counted those people. He said, how many are you? And they were all, they were all either multiples of 2, or they were part of that number. And in less than 5 minutes, he was able to get the total. And the total was about 803 or 808 or something like that. So he asked the guy at the door, how close are we to the total? And he said, very close. His number was, I think, 820 or something. So what the system did not allow for was people walking in or people walking out during the exercise, and therefore not being counted as part of those sets. However, they solved our problem in a fraction of the time it would have taken to count everybody in the hall. And they had enough time to check for errors as well, right? So that is how you solve computer problems. So Prachi, in her introduction to me, said that I was entering the software development stage. It's basically a small project that I'm doing because I've been working with software companies for so long, and I've always thought that I could develop software too. And I want to put my money where my mouth is, and I want to show myself whether I can do it, or if I fail, I will hand it over to someone who can do it better. But I've been in and out of hospitals. I was there personally in 2012 when I went to CMC Vellore, and I had treatment. As an inpatient, the systems are very efficient because you're in the system. And if you have to do a series of tests, for example, you have to do an X-ray, you have to do a sonogram, you have to do a bunch of other tests. The ward boy comes and takes you around, and you jump the queue, you get your test done, and you come back to the ward or your room. Or they sometimes come to your room and do the test over there if they can bring the equipment to the room. If you're an outpatient, what happens to you is that you stand in line for one test. And this happens in India. I've been speaking to people abroad, and I said, how do you handle this in your country? Do you have software that handles that? And they said, we never have that problem here. So this is something that you would find in India and Southeast Asian countries, South American countries, places where you have more population than you have resources, and then you have a queue. So you stand in a queue and go and get your X-ray, then you go for your sonogram, and they make you drink a liter of water and make you wait until your bladder is full, and then you go over there, right? You're at the end of the queue. There are 3 people with you, and between you and the pathologist there, and your bladder is bursting, and you wonder if you should, go relieve yourself and start all over again, or if you can hold it until the test happens. And sometimes you can't finish all of your tests in one day, because every time you finish one test, you go to the end of the queue in another place. So this happened when my mom was in the hospital. This happened when my dad was in the hospital. And when I went there this time, there was these really unnecessary delays. And I was getting irritated, and I spoke to the medical director in the hospital here. And fortunately, he's connected to some friends of mine. and they gave me his number, and I spoke to him and I said, this is something that happens in your OPD all the time. Is there some way you can increase efficiency? He said, no, this is how they run it. And, uh, the staff changes every time we give them training. There are a whole bunch of factors that affect that. One person's test can take 10 minutes, another person's test can take 15 minutes. I said, what if we have a virtual assistant for these OPD patients? And we feed in a bunch of rules over there, person's age, the illness, the test they need to do, prep time for an illness, the minimum time that a test takes, the maximum time a test takes, the factors that influence the time that a test takes, and build queues. We can build a system where you can efficiently have someone run from one test to another and go home quickly in a matter of hours. How this would help? It would help them in capacity planning. It would increase efficiency. They'll be able to handle more patients. It would churn out reports every week, every month, every day. And you could plan, you could train your staff, you could buy more equipment, you could buy your consumables, your film, your reagents, and all of that, and your bottles of water. And you could plan for more efficient service to the patients. And hospitals, like any other experience you have, right? It's not just about healing, but it's about the healing experience. A doctor who causes you less discomfort, who solves your problem, sends you home early, sends you home with no trace of the illness, when you're in total remission, is a doctor you will go to again. That's a hospital you will go to again. So this is something that I'm developing for those folks. The exercise is taking a lot more time than it should have because of the pandemic, and because I'm scared to go to the hospital and spend too much time there in the company of people with COVID-19. Right? I hope all of you are staying safe, because even if you get the illness and you recover, they're discovering that there are long-term effects of COVID-19. So stay safe, be smart, take care of your people at home, and solve your problems. So that is one way I'm using, my experience from the software industry, the efficiency algorithms that I'm exposed to reframe that situation in the hospital. Doctors are amazing. They can heal you, they can kill you, and not take the blame. They can do a whole bunch of stuff. There is some things that allopathy can do that none of the other disciplines can do. They're the best at handling emergencies. They're the best at saving lives when you have an accident or an injury, or in a very critical condition. Allopathy is probably the worst thing when you have a lifestyle disease, because the medication they give you, like for diabetes, for example, has a lot of side effects. And however, they're good at doing the stuff, but I've noticed that efficiency is not something that hospitals are very good at. And that is one area. They have hospital management software, which is more focused on sharing information, making information available at various stations as required. Instead of passing papers along, it's all available online. However, in spite of all of that, they still take half a day to do your billing and to release you from the hospital. Right? So you use framing to solve problems as well. Okay, there is a video I would like to show you at this point. So how much time do I have? Okay, there's a little video I want to show you from. Where is this meeting controls? This is the clip from a...
He's going to say something new and radical in the broadcast.
What, that silly grand design? Bernard, that was precisely what you had to avoid. How did this come about? I shall need a very good explanation.
Well, he's very keen on it.
What's that got to do with it? Things don't happen just because prime ministers are very keen on them. Neville Chamberlain was very keen on peace.
He thinks it's a vote win.
Ah, that's more serious. What makes him think that?
Well, the party have had an opinion poll done. It seems all the voters are in favour of bringing back national service.
Well, I have another opinion poll done showing the voters are against bringing back national service.
We can't be for it.
Oh, of course they can, Bernard. Have you ever been surveyed?
Yes, well, not me, actually, my house. Oh, I see what you mean.
You know what happens? Nice young lady comes up to you. Obviously, you want to create a good impression. You don't want to look a fool, do you? So she starts asking you some questions. Mr. Woolley, are you worried about the number of young people without jobs?
Yes.
Are you worried about the rise in crime among teenagers?
Yes.
Do you think there's a lack of discipline in our comprehensive schools?
Yes.
Do you think young people welcome some authority and leadership in their lives?
Yes.
Do you think they respond to a challenge?
Yes.
Would you be in favor of reintroducing national service?
Yes. Well, I suppose I might.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Of course you would, Bernard. After all you've told, you can't say no to that. So, they don't mention the first 5 questions, they publish the last one.
Is that really what they do?
Well, not the reputable ones, no, but there aren't many of those. So, alternatively, the young lady can get the opposite result.
How?
Mr. Woolley, are you worried about the danger of war?
Yes.
Are you worried about the growth of armaments?
Yes.
Do you think there's a danger in giving young people guns and teaching them how to kill?
Yes.
Do you think it's wrong to force people to take up arms against their will?
Yes.
Would you oppose the reintroduction of national service?
Yes.
There you are, you see, Bernard.
So you see that you can get contradictory responses just by changing the way you frame your questions, right? So there are some books that I would like to recommend. These are the books that I've read and I've prepared the presentation. So what I presented to you today is a light version of the original presentation that I had originally prepared. Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky are considered to be the fathers of framing theory and the power of framing, creating the language of leadership. So thank you for your attention. This is my contact information in case you want to discuss this more with me. And I would be very happy to take this up with you, and we can even call, you can even call, we can have a Zoom session, and we can do this privately as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin, for a very interesting session, a very different take on a very different subject. So we have a couple of questions. We have around 7 minutes before the next session. So we'll take a couple of questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So somebody wants to know, how can we use the art of framing to make user experience better in online help?
Yeah, so user experience in online help is not any difference from user experience with normal documentation. And one of the things that technical communicators need to realize is that user experience happens offline. User experience is not happening when you're reading documentation. User experience is what your documents deliver through the knowledge that you give them, right? And that I have reframed that your context for that as well. Your text, your document experience is very different from the user experience. Let me give you an example. If you're learning how to play the guitar, your experience of playing a song is your user experience. Your experience of reading a chord chart and playing a song is a different experience. Your experience of reading an instruction book on learning how to play the guitar is another experience as well. So when you're talking about the user experience of reading a document, how can you make the user experience of reading online help different? The way to do it is what so a lot of framing has already been built into our approach and into our templates, right? What we do currently is that the result of evolved framing. It is framing that has been refined over time. So you focus on the task, you focus on the area that is a blocker for the task, and you give them the answer that they require in order to continue with what they're doing. So that's how you improve the. Sometimes, one of the topics people wanted me to write about was uh, about content without information. And when I worked in a company once, there was a comment from one of our users, and unfortunately or fortunately, I joined that company from where that comment came, and the comment said, "So much text, so little information." Sometimes the documents are like that. So if you understand the user and you understand the user context, you can improve their user experience as well.
Okay. Edwin, before we move on to the next question, people would like to see the list of books again. So will you share that slide?
Yeah, sure.
You'll have to probably minimize your chat or Q&A, I think.
Okay.
Lock
Okay.
it with screen, yeah.
Okay. I will not open the chat. I will let you read those questions out to me.
Okay. Okay, I think the last, you'll have to again minimize your other window because the last book is getting blocked.
Okay.
Yeah. I hope everyone can see it. Okay. So the next one is, we are often told not to use rhetorical statements and documentation and to focus on the factual.
So I would encourage that person to look up rhetoric. Okay, so rhetoric is not a rhetorical. I remember once we had this discussion on Twin as well, and I spoke about rhetoric, and somebody said, "How do you use rhetorical questions in documentation?" So rhetoric is the science or the art of presenting your information in a particular way. The fact that you use active voice, that you address the second person, the fact that you use the inverted pyramid, all of these are rhetorical devices. So if you Google rhetorical device, you will come across a big list of rhetorical devices, right? Like, for example, you have a grammar rule that says you cannot have a one-word sentence. One rhetorical device says that you put in one word and you put in a period of after that to give it absolute emphasis. I have written that in some mails. I've said no, and I put a full stop after that. And that is your powerful statement. Instead of a sentence that says, no, we cannot do this because of this, right? So rhetorical devices, look up rhetorical devices. They are very much applicable to documentation. In fact, they are used in the principles that we use in our in creating content.
Okay, thanks. So we'll take a last question now, Edwin, from Deepak. So some writers are biased to accept the feedbacks, review comments from product manager, developers, QA, peers, and so on. So he believes that this is not a good frame. So what is your suggestion to these writers?
Yeah, so I've had this as a manager, right? I've had people who, and we worked at a time when there was intense, offshoring politics. I can't think of a more diplomatic way to say that. And people would get a lot of flack for stuff they did. And they would come to me and say, this person is always very mean. They always send me these, and they only do that in chat. They will not send it by mail, because then I can show you mail. But I wrote down their comments. They sometimes put that in review comments in a document and all of that. And they're very mean. They're demeaning. Some of them are borderline racist and all of that. How do I deal with that? My feedback to them, and this is also an example of framing. I said, look at that feedback and see if there is something in that feedback that you need to fix. If they say this word should not be used, you Indians always do that. And there are some problems with our vernacular languages. For example, Indian vernacular languages do not use articles like the and a. And many Indian English speakers, non-native English speakers, have a problem with the placement and use of articles. I know there are some e-learning companies that actually have training on the use of articles. and training on the use of that versus which and things like that, right? Some of these things come naturally to native English speakers. Sometimes native English speakers make as many or more mistakes than non-native English speakers as well. So I told them, so here is the thing, when you receive feedback, look at that feedback and see how much of that feedback you can use to improve your work. If that feedback is valid, work on that and write back to the person and said, thank you for sending me this input. I have fixed it. Can you approve the document now, right? So that person is helping you become a better version of who you are. If that feedback is just mean, it is not valid, and you can check with me whether that feedback is valid. And I will give you feedback as well on whether you need to act on that or not. If it is not, if that person is just being mean, then it is not your problem. It is their problem. There is an insecurity that they have that they're fighting. You can be smug about that you are giving them insecurities. And that changed the way these people looked at feedback that they got from people across, from wherever they were getting feedback. Sometimes people in the same office would do that as well, right? In fact, some of them would come to me and snicker and say, I got a lot of feedback today. I said, how much of that could you use? I said, some of it was actually valid. I said, great. So your document is that much better, right? So when people give you feedback, you cannot control those people and you can't control what they tell you. You can control your response and your reaction to feedback. That requires reframing how you think about feedback.
That was a great answer. So thank you, Edwin. Thank you for a very nice talk. You've got a lot of appreciation in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much.